All right, let's see what we have on our case study here about blood loss. So we've got an individual here, Bob. Has always been the type of person likes to do things for himself. Storm blows down some of his wooden fence. He decides he's going to repair it. So he makes a trip to the lumber yard and purchases a new skill saw and gets to work. Later in the afternoon, the hot summer heat, Bob has an accident. While cutting a piece of the lumber, the saw slips and cuts a large gash in his left hand. Bob immediately covers the wound with a rag, goes to the emergency room. After being admitted, Bob is finally able to see an ER physician. The physician removes the blood-soaked rag and observes the following. Large gash on his left hand extending from the proximal portion of the first digit to the distal portion of the palmar region. In addition, the wound appears to go at least an inch or more deep into the hand. When the rag is removed, the blood spurts out in a stream from the wound site. So they took a look at some things at Bob while he checked into the ER right here. Look at his heart rate, 110. Normal 72, definitely elevated. But look at his blood pressure, 105/62. Hopefully that's somewhere around 120/80, so he had elevated heart rate, low blood pressure. His breathing right here, so it's respiration, should have said ventilation right there, is at 25, definitely elevated. His hematocrit, the percent that red blood cells make of his blood volume, pretty normal right there. BUN, what's called blood urea nitrogen. It's a measure of waste products in the blood. Look at this, it's definitely getting towards the upper end of what you want to see. Blood glucose levels, just a little elevated, nothing unusual there. And look at his blood pH number, too low. Anytime that number's below 7.35, that's acidosis. It means there's too much hydrogen in the blood and body. And then notice how the urine output is low too. So we got some questions about Bob and what's happening to him right here. What is Bob's primary problem? Well, his primary problem is blood loss. And of course, with the loss in blood, you get a drop in pressure. Never good. You better make sure you maintain blood pressure and flow around the body, especially those vital organs. And number one, your brain. Brain receives more blood than anything else in you. And if those neurons go without adequate amounts of blood and oxygen, they'll start to die in just 2 to 4 minutes. So we see his pressure is definitely dropping, even though his heart rate is elevated. Heart can pump just as hard as it wants, but if it's losing the blood, the pressure's still going to drop. 2, how will Bob's body compensate for his primary problem? One thing we've already seen is the increase in heart rate. You bet you're going to see an increase in the beats per minute and the force of the contractions all at the same time. So there's mentioned in here. We just recently went over hormones. How about the hormone ADH? Remember, everything ADH does works to raise your blood pressure. So as blood pressure's dropping, release more ADH. It'll tell the kidneys to hold on to water, which will help to push the pressure up. And remember, ADH is also called vasopressin because it also constricts blood vessels, which will raise your blood pressure. Aldosterone also tells the kidneys to hold on to water. If you want to raise blood pressure, it's a good way to do it. Less blood will be seen going to places like the skin and other things which are less vital. And you're going to see a lot more blood going to those vital organs. So you're going to see vasoconstriction causing less blood to less vital things. And then, of course, vasodilation, more blood being sent to more vital organs. And here's some other hormones down here, epinephrine and norepinephrine. Those definitely change a lot of things, like blood flow around your body, and of course your heart rate too. So number 3, if Bob's heart rate is elevated, why is his pressure low? Well, again, Bob's number one problem is blood loss. So he's got a blood volume problem. Your heart is pumping that blood inside these enclosed pipes we call arteries and veins. So as the volume drops, the pressure is going to drop. Now the heart's trying to make up for this by becoming elevated, trying to pump faster beats per minute and with a stronger force, more blood with each contraction. So if the heart wasn't doing that, his blood pressure would be even lower than what it was. So, volume's going out of your body, pressure's still going to drop. Heart can only do so many things, and of course lots of other things work to push that pressure back up too. Why is Bob's respiration elevated? Well, think about this. A lot of Bob's blood is leaving his body. One of the big functions of your blood, specifically red blood cells and hemoglobin, is to transport oxygen. So as oxygen becomes less and less abundant to his cells, eventually they're going to start to pick up from making ATP through aerobic to anaerobic respiration. And anaerobic respiration produces a whole bunch of lactic acid. So look at this. As he runs out of oxygen, body has to swap from aerobic to anaerobic respiration. This produces lactic acid. And if you remember this little equation, which we probably looked at before, whatever you do to one side of it, you do to the other. So this guy's building up hydrogen ion. Remember, acids are all about concentration of hydrogen. And if hydrogen levels go up, CO2 levels go up. What you do to one side of a reversible chemical reaction, you're going to do the other. So because of the release of all this hydrogen, these acids through anaerobic respiration, CO2 becomes elevated. And when CO2 becomes elevated, you breathe faster. You're trying to exhale and get rid of that CO2 quicker, because if you can get rid of the CO2, that'll lower the hydrogen. Again, whatever happens to one side of a reversible chemical reaction happens to the other. So in summary, his body's trying to balance the CO2 to balance the hydrogen. Number 5, what is hematocrit? Again, that's the percent, not just a number, but always the percent that red blood cells make of your total blood volume. That should be around 45%. That's right where Bob was at. What was that BUN we heard about? It's a little abbreviation for blood urea nitrogen. What it is basically a measure of how much waste material's in your blood. So it gives you an idea of the waste concentrations floating around in the plasma. Number 7, why is BUN elevated in Bob's blood? Well, think about this. His blood pressure's dropping. When your blood pressure drops, what are you going to tell your kidneys to do? Hold water. So as he decreases his urine output, he decreases waste removal. And that's why the quantity of waste in his body are elevated. Body doesn't like doing this, but if blood pressure's dropping, you got to hold that water whether you like it or not. 8, why are glucose levels elevated? Well, for different reasons. First of all, he was outside working. Of course, you work. That activates the sympathetic division of the nervous system. And of course, when we release that epinephrine and norepinephrine, just one thing that it does is elevate your blood glucose levels. A lot of hormones do that, but these are just a few of them right here. Then he cut that hand. You can bet he got intense activation of that sympathetic division at that time right there, and that probably elevated it all a little bit more. Number 9, why is his blood pH low? Remember that anaerobic respiration, if your cells run out of oxygen, they can no longer go through aerobic. But if they run out of oxygen, they don't like it, but they got no choice to swap to anaerobic. And again, that makes a lot of lactic acid. More hydrogen, more acid lowers the pH. Remember, that's what's called acidosis. Somebody's got too much hydrogen in their blood. pH number's too low. However you want to look at it right there. And again, why is his urine output low? Again, the body has two options right here. It can continue urine output as usual, or it could hold on to that water and try and elevate his blood pressure. So there's really no choice right here. Body's got to hold on to that water. You got to keep that blood pressure elevated. You'll worry about waste removal later. So there's a little bit more on your answers over here to the side or whatever, but just a little short case study right there on blood volume loss, and of course some things you see in response to it. So we'll continue with blood after this.